Did you know that your elevated blood sugars have nothing to do with your diabetes? That's what I said. It's not about the sugar. The reality is most people are going to tell you that your diabetes is due, or the cause of your diabetes is elevated sugars. And that's not the case at all. It's like saying that high fire, the elevated fire, was caused because of the gasoline you threw on it. The gasoline may have made the fire worse, but it didn't cause the fire. And diabetes is no different. So the reality is most people in the diabetic world, the physicians, the endocrinologists, the PCPs, and even the medical world in general, insurance companies are going to tell you that as long as your blood sugars are being managed appropriately, you're going to be fine. Well, I'm here to tell you that's not the truth. And I'll tell you a quick story about this, about me personally, because my mom was a type 2 diabetic. And I say was because unfortunately she lost her life to diabetes. This is one of the reasons why I do this type of work and her legacy. You see, my mom was diabetic for many, many years. And for many of those years, I tried to help her. I tried to give her the insight she needed to help her to essentially reverse diabetes, what we specifically do in our office to help people get off medications, have normal A1Cs, normal blood sugars, and live a normal life. But unfortunately, my mom never wanted help. Why didn't she want help? Because her doctors were telling her that everything was fine. They were telling her that her blood sugars were fine. They were telling her that her A1C was fine, that she was fine. And in essence, she actually felt pretty good. You see, it wasn't until things started to not become good. And that first symptom that my mom experienced was dialysis. Yes, dialysis. See, many of you believe they're going to start seeing these gradual symptoms of diabetes that you hear about. Maybe some neuropathy, or maybe you have a little bit blood pressure issues. Are those possible? Absolutely. But the reality is for most people, it's a dramatic event. It's a heart attack. It's a stroke. You lose a limb. You go on dialysis. In my mom's situation, it was dialysis. That was her first symptoms, guys. It's terrible. And at that point, when she was in dialysis, guess what happened? She gave me a phone call. Hey, Jason, can you help me? What can we do now? I'm in dialysis. I don't want to be in dialysis. I'm scared, etc. And it was the first time I had to have a real conversation with my mom about the situation and told her I couldn't help her. Imagine that conversation, guys, where I'm talking to my mom, one of the most important people in my life, my best friend. We had each other's back forever, that I couldn't help her. And that's not even the sad part. You see, the sad part was at that point, I went to her doctors and I said, hey, what's the deal? She was doing fine. Her A1C, just so you know, I didn't mention this, her A1C at the time was a 6.1. Think about this. Her A1C was a 6.1, which means her diabetes was being managed appropriately. So if your diabetes is truly due to high sugars, how can somebody go on dialysis with a 6.1 A1C? Because it has nothing to do with your sugars. And what's interesting is I went to her doctors and asked, and they couldn't even answer the question either. They had no idea. But they were so focused on now a new problem, her dialysis. Now, the scary part was as things progressed over time, roughly 8 months later, she had a stroke and she passed. I was there that day holding my mom's hand in her last breath. And I sat there and stared at her for a few minutes in anger. I was angry, not at the doctors, not at the nurses. They all did a great job, did what they had to do. I was angry at the system. I was angry about the situation that she was put in, that she wasn't told the right information by her doctors that she trusted. Even though I was trying to force her, if you will, she wasn't going to listen to me because I was her son, her little baby, if you will. Why would I want to listen to you? These doctors are way more educated or whatever else at the time. She had more trust in them, but unfortunately they let her go. My intention and why I do this type of work every single day is a passion now. And that passion grew. When I left that hospital, I was so angry and so frustrated. At that point, I started yelling at the mountaintops about what we can do. You see, going back to my initial statement, your diabetes has nothing to do with your sugars. That's a perfect example of my mom. Her A1C was a 6.1. That's like pre-diabetes numbers. Even though she was taking medication, you would think that's pretty regulated sugars, but it has nothing to do with your sugars. You see, your sugars are going high because your body is getting sicker. When I say your body, the disease is progressing. The disease is not high sugars. The disease are your cells. You have all probably heard the term insulin resistance. You may have heard that term and different reasons, but nobody really knows what it means. When I ask people, they say, oh, my body's no longer, it's resistant to insulin. No, that's not what it means. It means that your cells are dying. You see, when you have blood sugar regulation, it all starts with the food you consume. The food you bring in gets into your intestinal tract and it is breaking down in your gut. That breakdown eventually converts it into glucose or sugar. That now becomes our fuel source. See, we need sugar as human beings. That's our fuel source, just like your car needs gas. If you have no gas in your car, where's your car going? Nowhere. But imagine this. Imagine if you have all the gas you need in the gas tank, but it never reaches your engine. Your car is still going nowhere, so the gas is there. This is exactly what happens in the body of human beings. You see, once it gets converted to sugar, it then releases into your bloodstream. A similar analogy would be the gas line. Now, as it gets into your bloodstream, it then has to get to your cells. You see, inside your cells, we have something called mitochondria. These are our engines. Just like our car has an engine, our body has engines inside of our cells, and there's hundreds of them in all of our cells. We have trillions of cells. So once that sugar enters your cell, it then goes into your engine, which then creates what's called ATP, or energy, your ability to provide energy for your body. So your brain can function, so your heart can beat, so your lungs can breathe, and so that you can function and have the energy to do things you love to do, spend time with your family, work, etc. The things we love to do, we need energy, right? We can force that energy with caffeine, or we can have our body create it itself by proper blood sugar regulation. You see, this is why so many people are talking about longevity, and it starts with blood sugar regulation. If you don't have good blood sugar regulation, the chances of you dying early is a higher outcome. And there's a reason for that. And we'll talk about that here in a minute. But here's the thing, guys. I'm going through all this information with you right now. I'm going to continue on this story in a second here. But if you want to gather more information about what you need to do to start reversing your diabetes, make sure you click that guide down below. I created this guide for you to get the data you need to start doing the right steps to start reversing your own diabetes. And I hope that you enjoy that. So click that link there. So going back to the story here. Now we have a scenario where now the sugar has been released from your gut and it's now in your bloodstream, your fuel line. It has to get to your cells and inside your cells into your engines. When that happens, you function well. You have good brain function. You have good energy. You're sleeping well. You can get through the day. You can spend time with your kids. You can work. All the things you need to do is going to happen when you have good blood sugar regulation. Just like your car can get you to point A and point B when the gas can get to your engine and your engine's working properly. This is no different. This is the human body. But here's where it breaks down. You see, what happens over time is things start to create clogging, if you will, in those cells. And the ability for the sugar to get into the cells becomes deficient. Now, when you have a small percentage of your cells this is happening to, let's just call it 2 to 3%, you're not even going to notice it. Not even going to be an issue. You're still going to function. You may have a little bit of fatigue, but you're like thinking, oh, I'm getting older. It's part of the process. You're being told you're getting older, even though it's not a reality. But the real thing is that your cells are starting to become damaged for whatever reason that might be. Let's say a couple years go by and now it goes from 3% damage of your cells to now 7%. Maybe you have a little more symptoms. Maybe there's a little more fatigue. You're getting tired in the middle of the day and you want to take a nap, or you can barely wake up in the morning. You're so groggy. You're not getting the best quality of sleep. Your brain is not functioning as well, if you will. The only difference about this scenario is that things are progressing. Things are progressing in the body. It has nothing to do with how old you are, has nothing to do with how long you've been on this earth or anything else, because this is a progression of your diabetes. In this situation, you're not diabetic yet, but you get the picture. So now a couple more years go by. Now, instead of it being 7%, it's now 10% of your cells. A couple more years go by. Now it's 15%. Now, when you start to get to a certain threshold of cells, there's no clear evidence on what that percentage looks like, but there's a certain point in time where now your sugars are not being able to get into a higher percentage of your cells. And where does the sugar go? Back into your bloodstream. And it starts to cause high sugars. So then you go see your doctor and they say, oh, you have type 2 diabetes. Change your diet, exercise, lose weight, take medication. So you do those things and guess what happens? Your sugars come down. And why'd they come down? Because you're doing lifestyle changes. You're making changes in the way you're doing things. You're exercising a little more, you're losing some weight, you're eating better, you're taking medication. It's going to force your sugars down. That's what it's supposed to do. But what happens? A couple more years go by. Now you're at a 20%, 25%, because the reality is by eating better, by exercising, by losing weight and taking medication, it will lower your sugars. For sure, it'll lower your sugars. But is it going to fix the cells? No. Because whatever is going on in your body that is driving that cellular damage is still there. And here's what we know. We know of over 20 years of analyzing individuals, probably 30-something thousand tests that I've done over the last 20 years. Here's what we find. Most type 2 diabetics, the amount of problems they're dealing with are anywhere between 10 and 20 different problems. So on a high end, we're seeing around 20 on average. And on the low end, we're seeing about 10 on average. But here's the thing. Just yesterday, I saw someone with 42 different problems. And I saw someone else a couple days earlier with 8 problems. So on average, between 10 and 20. So let's just say in your situation, you have 10 problems. And let's say one of those problems is you need to eat better. So you start changing the way you eat. And that's one problem gone. Now you say, okay, I need to lose some weight. So you start losing some weight. Another problem gone. Now you say, I got to start exercising. So you start exercising. So now you're doing the most common recommendations. How many problems are left? 7. Can you reverse diabetes with still having 7 problems? No. So this is why many of you are taking medications, you're eating appropriately, you're doing all the right things, and you're still seeing a progression of your diabetes because you haven't identified the problems that are going on in your body. You see, once you understand what those problems are, and the only way you're going to identify that is through comprehensive testing. I'm not talking about the testing your doctor runs on you, because your doctor is probably a lovely person, but they're not doing comprehensive testing because that's not their job. See, their job is to manage your sugars, to keep them low by giving you pharmaceutical drugs and to help you by saying, change your lifestyle. But when that no longer works, what do you need to do? More medication. You see, when you're taking more medication, what is that indicating? That your disease is progressing. That's the only reason it's happening. Unless you're eating terrible, like McDonald's every single day, which likely most people we meet with are not doing. But if you're eating appropriately or somewhat appropriately, doing the right things, and you're seeing higher sugars, your disease is progressing. And if you take more medication, will it lower your sugars? Yeah, but eventually it will no longer work. Why? Because more cells will become damaged. Because eventually when you get a high percentage of your cells that are damaged, what happens? You start noticing the complications. Think about in your body. What is one area in your body that's not made of cells? They're all made of cells, which means, let's just take, for example, one organ. Let's say your kidneys. So when you have a high percentage of the cells in your kidneys damaged, what happens? The kidneys fail and you're in dialysis. When you have a high percentage of your nerve cells damaged, what happens? The nerves fail and you have amputations. When you have a high percentage of your eye cells damaged, what happens? Vision loss, blindness. When you have a high percentage of your heart cells damaged, heart attack, stroke, etc., etc. It's the only disease that we know of that impacts almost every single area of your body, but the complication will only occur when enough cells are damaged. That's why so many people come to me and they say, I feel fine, doc. Yeah, you feel fine now because you haven't had enough cellular damage to start feeling the symptoms. And when that happens, game over, too late. So earlier I mentioned, this is why so many longevity integrative doctors talk about longevity of your health and being able to have a good chronic beneficial health relies on normal blood sugar regulation. Because here's the thing, just like your car, remember your car example. If I put gas into my gas tank and it never reaches the engine, what happens? The car's dead. It doesn't run anywhere. Well, guess what happens to you when a very high percentage of the cells in your body become damaged? You die. And that's the reason why people with diabetes are at a high risk of an early death, because when enough cells are damaged, you die because you can't get your sugar, your fuel, to your engines, and your heart can't beat properly, your brain can't function properly, your eyes can't do its job, your lungs, your kidneys, etc., and things break down. So this is why it's so massively important that you truly understand if your only focus is to lower sugars, your disease is going to progress. But if you become more understanding of the disease itself, like we have been talking about here today, understand that it's a cellular disease, and you need to identify your cellular problem. Once you identify your cellular problem, it's easy. You can start putting the proper steps in place. The good news is this, I guess this is my bias, this does not require pharmaceutical drugs to fix the underlying cellular problems. It requires proper nutrition, requires proper nutrient supplementation, nutraceuticals, things that are more natural healing that's been around for thousands of years, not pharmaceuticals that have been around 100 years. You see, there's no pharmaceutical that we know in science that's going to help you reverse diabetes. It's not going to happen. The statistics are very staggering about when you follow the traditional recommendation, which is, we call it standard of care. Change your diet, exercise, lose weight, take medication. That's called the standard of care. When you do that, it's a very low percentage. The percentage, we know it by the research, is 0.23%. That's the reversal rate. which means if you follow that recommendation, 1 out of 400 people will reverse diabetes. What if I had that offer for you? Would you be open to that? Of course not, but that's the recommendation you're currently doing. But when you take your health into your own hands and you find a doctor like myself who does functional medicine, who can evaluate you comprehensively to identify what problems are driving your cellular problems, and we can start to put a customized solution, it becomes very simple. And you start reversing your diabetes, seeing lower blood sugars, less need for medications, you're feeling better, your physiology is improving, your organs are getting better because your body is essentially going back to where it was at one time, where it was able to regulate its own sugars. So you can fully reverse diabetes. You can fully get to a point where you no longer need medications, become a non-diabetic. We see this all the time. Here's the thing. If you want to learn more about what we do and how we help with individuals, make sure you watch this video right here because I go into much more depth of the specific things that we do, how we identify things, the proper testing to do, etc., so that you can learn, have the tools you need to finally start reversing your diabetes. All right, we'll see you there. Take care.